This podcast is powered by Tequila Fortaleza, handmade in small batches, and hands down, my favorite tequila. Hey folks, I'm always telling you, ask your doctor if Baja is right for you. Well, I don't know what your doctor's going to say, but I want to let you know right now, it's the open enrollment period for the 2023 Baja XL Rally. That's right. If you need a little Baja care, you got to get in right now during the open enrollment period for the 2023 Baja XL Rally. February 17th through 26th, it's 3,000 miles in 10 days. It's a minimal assistance rally. That means there's no rescue trucks or no medical helicopters or no travel guides. You get to rely on your own wits and resources and probably the other 150 or 180 vehicles that are in this rally with you, who are always darn nice and willing to tow you out or give you a ride to the auto parts store or to the mechanic or whatever you need. But hey, the Baja XL is open to anyone by anything, so if it's street legal, you can drive at their classes. There's a competition class if you want to get in and solve geotagging treasure hunt questions all day and all night. There's the 4x4 touring class that Slow Baja does, where we just pull out our benchmark map first thing in the morning, get some machaca, some eggs, some hot coffee, take a look at where the route ends that day, and figure out what the most scenic, squiggly dirt roads are on our map, and that's how we do it. Again, there's no judging. It's a heck of a lot of fun. It's a major league adventure, and it will certainly cure your symptoms of mild seasonal lack of adventuring. All right, ask your doctor if Baja is right for you. The Baja XL Rally. More info at bajaxl.org, or feel free to DM me through slowbaja.com or the Slow Baja Instagram or Facebook sites for more info. Hey, well, thanks for tuning in today to the Slow Baja. I've got a shout out immediately without doing anything else. Shout out my source of so much Baja information, David Keir, vivabaja.com. Thanks, David. You had pinged me a couple of years ago now. We're into year 3 for Slow Baja. Year 3, folks. David Keir reached out and said I needed to talk to his friends Genevieve Mattar and Kevin Branscum about their work on the El Camino Real. They've spent 22 years, folks, 22 years backpacking the El Camino Real and mapping the exact location as much as they can find, the exact locations of all the offshoots and the main highway and all of that. And we'll get into that in today's show. But they're really amazing folks, and they are slow Baja, as the kids would say, slow Baja AF. They are way slow Baja-er than me, and I just can't wait to share today's show with you. So without further ado, hey, thanks David Keir for bringing them to my attention. I'm sorry this one wasn't in person. We're on a Riverside FM call today, and I've got Christopher Kaiser, my producer, on the line. He's making it all sound good. So without further ado, Kevin Branscum, Genevieve Mattar, and we're talking about the El Camino Real on Slow Baja. It's Slow Baja, and my fabulous guests for today are Kevin Branscum and Genevieve Mattar. I hope I didn't butcher that too much, but they have spent decades researching the El Camino Real, and I am really excited to get their take on the work they've put in on the ground, on the internet, and let them tell us all about the King's Highway. So, hello, Kevin, Genevieve.
Hello.
Hi.
It's good to be here.
Thanks for having us.
Tell me a little bit about the two of you and your background and how you got going on this. I think it's kind of qualifies as an obsession.
Well, Kevin has been going to Baja since, how old were you?
I don't know. It's about 50 years.
And when I came into his life, I moved from Ottawa, Canada, to Southern California. And being close to the Mexican border, he started introducing me to road trips into Baja. And little by little, we went further and further south. And eventually, we came across some information on mule trips, and we started going to those mule trips, in 2000. And that's when we first saw sections of El Camino Real. And that really sparked an interest in us. Where did those caminos come from? Where are they headed to? And from there, we started wanting to learn more and more about them, and going on them, walking them, or going on mules, using those trails, but finding the exact location of those trails.
Now, I'm going to take it one step before that to tell you how I met Genevieve. I went down into South America to do some climbing in the Andes, and I met a beautiful young French-Canadian girl, and she was guiding clients from Eastern Canada. And just by coincidence, over the next several days, we kept meeting. We met in a hotel while she was keeping records and making plans for her clients. And by the way, her clients are English speaking and French speaking, and she's also Spanish speaking. So she's translating with these three languages, and I was very, very impressed. We met the second day out on a trip to the Sacred Valley outside of Cusco. And again, just by coincidence, we got to talk, meet each other a little bit more. She would translate some things, not only from Spanish, but from some of her French clients for me. And then the most important time together is, by coincidence, once again, we were backpacking the Inca Trail. I was doing that on my own, and she was taking clients across the Inca Trail to Machu Picchu.
And that was in 1986.
So we kind of got to know each other out on a trail in a faraway place, the trail, one of the main trails of the Incas. So we started out with kind of an interest in this, experience in this kind of thing. We got together during that summer and ended up getting married, and so we've been doing this kind of thing our whole lives together, about 36 years now. We have done it in other parts of the world. In addition to Baja, we've done a couple of the long hikes in Turkey along Roman roads and ancient roads, even pre-Roman. We've done it in other parts of the world, but Baja is close to home and has a special place for us. So that's where we've spent most of our time, and it kind of all ties together. The same desire, and as you say, the same obsession, but it mostly is in Baja. And we've spent about 22 years doing this, and we have probably at least another 22 years of work ahead of us.
Wow. Well, can you give the Slow Baja audience a little bit of a primer on when these roads started, the first mission, a little background basically on the mission system? We don't have David Keir here on tap to give us a 30 seconds education on the missions, but tell us a little bit about that first mission in Loreto, and then this highway system that grew from it as they started bringing in other missions.
Well, you're right. David would be the guy to give you the best information and dates. He's really the expert on that. But I have a general idea of how it worked. First, Cortez came over very early on. I can't tell you the years, but in the 1500s, I think they were mostly interested in pearl fisheries. It didn't work, so there was nothing permanent settled from that particular expedition. The next one to come over that was close to being established was a mission north of Loreto. That did not work, but when finally the mission started I think it was in the 1680s, it might be 1690s, in Loreto, that one stuck. It actually worked. And then they started expanding outward. That was the Jesuits that were doing that. They expanded out to San Javier in the mountains and started going first northward and then south to the lower end of the peninsula, but it expanded northward eventually up into Alta California, which is now the present state of California. And so that's kind of how the whole thing began.
And can you tell me a little bit about the El Camino? I think if anybody's thinking about the El Camino, at least when I think about the El Camino, I think of one road. I think of a one-lane dirt path. But honestly, the El Camino is multiple roads, if I'm not mistaken, for use at different seasons when there would be water in the water holes in one place and not in another, through the mountains, through the coast, through the desert. What can you tell me about the different El Caminos?
First of all, you have to remember that the El Camino began in Spain. It travels through Spain across the Atlantic Ocean, and then it travels throughout, what we're talking about, Mexico, and then across the Sea of Cortez to the Baja Peninsula. So it all began out there in Spain, working across to the peninsula, and then it starts working its way through the peninsula. Now, most people think of El Camino Real as being a single road going from mission to mission, and certainly it is that, but our work has shown that it's kind of almost like a spider web of different trails going out in different directions for different reasons. For example, each mission had little side places called visitas that would help supply the food for the mission. So there had to be roads going out to those particular sites. But also, as you were saying, the trail, even going from mission to mission, would oftentimes have different branches for different reasons, because this is a desert area, and sometimes there's an overabundance of water, but usually there's less than what is needed. So the trail had to really work with that. Some sections, for example, the one going from Santa Gertrudis, the Mission Santa Gertrudis, to Mission San Borja, it would have 3 branches to it. The one branch closest to the Sea of Cortez is called the Golfo. The center usually is traveling through the mountains. They call this the Sierra. It was usually the main trail because there's more water in the mountains usually. And then sometimes there's a branch out closer to the Pacific Ocean, and you'll see that often called the Pacifico. Now, sometimes they're not certain about the existence of some of these. Well, I'm thinking about the Pacifico approaching Mission San Borja. It probably existed, but there's so little information about it that there's still some question about it. But certainly in other parts of the peninsula, there are 3 different branches, sometimes only 2, and sometimes only 1. But that's kind of how it works. We thought we would be working on a trail section of maybe 600 miles. We can see this is going to go way beyond 600 miles. And that's just only what we've worked on so far. Because of all the different branches going to the visitas, going out, taking advantage of water sources, it's really multiplying the mileage. And sometimes we're finding trails that are definitely missionary, and we still haven't figured out why they're there. And so, anyway, there's a lot of mystery involved in it as well.
And can we talk a little bit about a typical trip for the two of you, where you started, how you started? 22 years ago, you stumbled upon this on a mule trip. Obviously, the way you two met on the Inca Trail, it tells me you two are adventurous. Kevin, I know you're a school teacher, now retired. Genevieve, were you a school teacher as well? What was your background?
Yes, I was. And we were school teachers actually for many years at the same school, and sometimes next door to each other. All
right, quick aside, did the kids think you guys were cool?
They liked watching our slideshows.
Yeah.
They really enjoyed that. Yeah.
And you taught young children, as I understand.
Yes. Elementary kids.
Yeah, generally primary grades. Second grade more for me than any other.
Fantastic. The eyeballs are open, the brains are wide, and I hope you filled them with lots of exciting educational opportunities. Tell me about the two of you, and how do you attack something that's as long as 600 plus miles? I mean, how do you start? Where did you start?
Well, we did this in sections over many years. And typically, Kevin would spend hours and hours at home, at the computer, in historical books, doing the research to get information on where the El Camino Real would be going through. And I'm just talking about a section. And we would be gathering equipment before our trip. And once we get going on the trip, the moment we cross the border into Mexico, then my job becomes more important. Being an interpreter, asking people over and over, different people, where they think the El Camino Real is. The ranchers are a huge source of information for us as well. So we would do a lot of research with our pickup, asking the ranchers around. And this is a knowledge that is disappearing. And the younger generations are leaving the ranches, and the older generations are dying with the knowledge of the El Camino Real. And that is why that is one of the reasons that stimulated us into getting this information down.
And I'll expand a little bit on our preparation. So we would have a lot of information from Google Earth, from historical sources. We would, being school teachers, remember, we would go down usually on Christmas vacation, and we would have a particular place we were going to explore. The main thing we would do is go out and try to find water sources along the section of trail. That's not always possible along the whole trail. Some are just too isolated. But the places that were close enough we could access on a Christmas vacation trip, we would go out, check the waters. First of all, water holes, they're not guaranteed to have water. Even if we find the water hole, it could be dry, and that has happened to us. But anyway, we find the water sources, we explore any places, trying to find bits and pieces of existing trail, get all this information down, get it on our GPS units. Then we come back in Easter fully prepared. We then get out on the trail and backpack through a section that we're trying to get the information on, seeing if our guesses were correct. Sometimes they were, sometimes they weren't. We've had to revisit, about a 10-mile section as many as 6 times to get it right.
Wow.
But eventually we did. And so sometimes we had to actually put in caches. If there was no water, no reliable water, we would have to set in caches, and that's a whole other story in itself. But anyway, usually backpacking a section would oftentimes require 2 trips. A preliminary trip to establish water sources, because in a desert backpack, water is everything. And then the return to actually do it, get notes, find out what actually worked, where the trail really was, where the trail really was not. And then on a trip in the future, we would return and try to iron out those places until we were satisfied we had the trail under our boots. Now, of course, having said that, remember the trail is not in existence in all places, so there are some parts you cannot say if you're on the trail. But if you walk far enough down the trail, you'll come to a bit of it. So a lot of it is still there, it's just not fully there anymore.
And what sort of clues do you find, Kevin? What sort of clues on the ground do you say, this is it, we're on it? Definitely, this is it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, coming into water holes is a great thing. Because if you know that they went into, say, the water hole called Ubai, and you can find a piece of trail going into it, you are on the El Camino without doubt. You're on it. And it leaving, so you already have 2 pieces of trail right there. You can look at the ground, you can see that it has been used. There's a little bit of maybe a flatness, or maybe the rocks have been moved to the side. That's the big sign for a lot of Jesuit trail. But sometimes you can hardly tell. You can stand there, and if you look at the ground, you can see a slight difference in the angle of the ground, and you realize that that's most likely the mission trail. Now, if you walk in the direction of that slight ground change, and then you come to a piece that you know is really it, because you can see, like I said, rocks move to the side, or a better surface that you could tell is old trail, then you can be pretty safely guessing that you have been on the mission trail. Sometimes there isn't anything. Oh, and sometimes there's a vegetation change, and that's another sign of the mission trail. I don't know if it's due to the ground being packed over the time, but often there is a vegetation change, and even though there's hardly any trail left, you can tell that there's a vegetation difference right in that spot. And sometimes you can travel on that for miles, and you can see off to your left, off to your right, the vegetation is very different. Another great place to see the trail is going into arroyos or out of arroyos, because you can see that's a great place where the old trail has cut. If it's not been washed away by floods, oftentimes you can see it dropping down into the arroyos. Another great place to feel pretty secure. You have a piece of the old trail.
And what books did you use, or what resources did you use to do the home portion of your studies? I'm assuming you're reading Harry Crosby. I'm assuming you're reading Howard Gulick. But what did you get before the 1950s, before Howard was doing his research?
Well, I want to add to that. David Keir, of course, is a good source of information, and a friend in La Paz, Mexico, in Baja. I can't pronounce his last name. Harold Peichman.
Yes.
He's another good source of information also. But in the distant past, you know what? I can't tell you precisely, because we're talking about 22 years of work. But for example, there was a Dr. Nelson in 1905 that he was traveling along the old mission trail. I know this is long after the mission trail was in regular use, but he was still able to travel along. And he gave a bit of information in something that I was reading. It was a distance from El Rosario to a water hole, Las Cuevas. Now, it's sometimes it's called Las Cuevas, Las Cuevitas. I've heard it, it was said both ways. But he gave a distance, and that distance was important to me because I knew of the existence of this water hole. It's between Mission San Fernando and El Rosario, but I didn't know where it was at. He gave a distance in his description of his travels, and that helped us find where that water hole is. And so bits and pieces from all kinds of sources, from let's see, Negrete, Serra himself in his journal. Of course, he had place names and he had distances, which were, somewhat helpful. They were kind of a bit off of what we would measure today, but still helpful. People like, I think Brown was his name. A lot of the Padres would give little nuggets of information. Some of the old gold miners traveling through would give a little bits and pieces of information. So it takes a lot of work to try to find just little things that will help you find different places on the trail. That's what it's all about, is just doing a lot of reading, trying to find little nuggets of information.
Yeah, you've got Junipero Serra, Portola, Padre Crespi, I think, did a lot of the documentation there, and that stuff's going back to 1700s. They were sort of at the end of the Jesuits. They came in after the Jesuits, if I have my dates and histories correct. Again, I wish I had David on this call to get all of that stuff straightened away. Can we change gears a little bit and just talk about 22 years of backpacking in Baja? Where have you gone? What have you loved? I mean, you've walked an awful lot of that peninsula. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Well, now I can't say that every trip was purely about working on El Camino, because we would oftentimes have friends, and they don't have the obsession we have. So we had to be considerate of what they wanted to see and do down there as well. But they were extremely considerate towards us, because we did do a lot of work over the years on that. And actually, a lot of our friends were helping us. Sometimes we were all scouring through the desert, trying to find bits and pieces of the trail. But excuse me, I'm sorry. Get me back onto the topic.
Let me just ask you that one again, Kevin.
Yes.
22 years of travel to Baja on this obsession of mapping the El Camino. Let's change gears and just talk about the places you've been and the things you've loved, and what, whether you shared that with friends or not. What are some of the highlights of this 2-decade-long experience?
Well, first of all, our website is presently only covering the section from El Rosario down to Loreto. We chose this section because we felt it was the wildest part of the Baja Peninsula in regards to the mission trail, and we wanted to see pretty much what the Padres, the people traveling the mission trail at that time, were seeing. And I think really you get a lot of that from El Rosario down to Loreto. So that's really what we concentrated on, that particular region. We're now expanding outward. We're expanding a little bit south of Loreto now. Our last trip this fall, we did a little bit of work below San Javier. And so those are the areas that we're concentrating on, but expanding outward now, because we have covered a lot of the mission trails. We've been very successful in that primary target area. We're certainly not finished. We have, we still have to actually be on the ground and check a couple of branches. For example, the Golfo, in the section from Santa Gertrudis to San Borja, we have not checked that out. We haven't mapped out what we think is the mission trail, but we don't feel good until we actually have had our boots on it. And so that's one area we still need to work on. We've got the Sierra route down. We know it really well. We're very satisfied with that. But a few bits and pieces we still need to iron out on that midsection. But we're still starting to expand out elsewhere. So we're not focused too much on one place. We do like to expand out and see new areas, especially since we do sometimes have people traveling with us. We don't want them to get sick of one area, so we need to kind of expand out a bit for them as well.
Here at Slow Baja, we can't wait to drive our old Land Cruiser south of the border. And when we go, we'll be going with Baja Bound Insurance. Their website's fast and easy to use. Check them out at bajabound.com. That's bajabound.com, serving Mexico travelers since 1994. Can you tell me a little bit about how you go about your travels in Baja? Do you fly to Loreto? Do you drive from Bend down to Baja? Do you have a four-wheel drive? Break that down a little bit for me.
We have a pickup four-wheel drive that we take down to Baja, and we even carry a minimum of 2 spare tires, because on the road that we travel on, we have had to use both spare tires on the same trip. So it's necessary to be well equipped when it comes to having a reliable vehicle.
Sometimes we even bring a spare driver, and we have very good friends that are very happy to drop us off at a place and use GPS coordinates and maps to find us at the other end of our backpack. So not only do we carry 2 spares, we carry a spare driver as well.
And
go ahead. So that sounds like a double cab pickup truck, and you've got a couple tires in the back for sure, plus all of your camping gear. What have you learned over the years as far as how do you two camp in Baja? How do you two manage the hiking portion of your travels?
We have been able, through time and through experience, to narrow down precisely what type of equipment works really well for us. And I would say the number one item would be our thick leather boots, because of all the spines that we encounter on the trails. With the leather boots, we also carry like some mini pliers, because it's inevitable that one of us or both of us are going to get cactus thorns, and once they penetrate our skin, they have these little barbs that make it difficult to pull out. So these little pliers are very helpful. We have some gaiters that are also thorn-proof.
And snake-proof.
And snake-proof, that's right.
And that's important. We've been very close and had some real close encounters in the past.
Yeah, Kevin has found himself with a rattlesnake on the ground between his feet, and trying to tiptoe quickly away from it.
But we have ultralight equipment also for the camping part. We have a super light tent. We have our water is, of course, everything down here. You have to have a really